Maybe it's a skeptic in me, or maybe it's because if there's a steady paycheck in it, I'll believe whatever you want, but I always kind of like Winston. Greetings, people of the internet. I'm Scott with Serkworks Art Labs. Welcome to the underground laboratory where we create robots, aliens, zombies, and other imminent threats to humanity. And also, we create fan art. At least we have been lately. We've been doing a series of fan art from one of my favorite series, Stranger Things, because Stranger Things 2 was released not too long ago on Netflix, and I'm still totally into it, and I just love doing some drawings from this series. So anyway, who do we have left? We've got I think maybe there's at least 3 more characters I want to get to. But today is a character that I kind of had some issues with him in the first series, but towards the end kind of turned things around and I was digging him. But this season I'm really loving this character. So the character we're going to do today is Lucas, and again, I'm not sure if this comes in, if you can see that sketch, but you'll see it in a minute when we scan it into the computer and we do the rest digitally as we do a colored rendering, drawing, whatever you want to call it, of Lucas from Stranger Things. And I'm trying to think what I want to do with these drawings once I finish them all, because I'll have a series. So I don't know if I want to kind of line them up like almost like if you know about animation, they've got little sizing charts and just characters side by side, and maybe I don't just do like a limited print run of that if anyone's interested, or maybe stickers or something. I don't know. If you guys are interested in any of that, let me know. But for now, let's get to drawing Lucas. Alright, so let's illustrate Lucas Sinclair from Stranger Things. Now, I've done most of these sketches in my sketchbook, and I just use a Prismacolor Coal Erase pencil. In this case, I'm using orange. The color really doesn't matter. It's kind of whatever I feel like. Maybe it was because it was around Halloween when I first drew these sketches that I used orange. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, so after I've scanned in my sketch, I go into Illustrator, which is Adobe Illustrator, the program I'm using now. And I go, and as you can see, I kind of did my outline around the edges. It's an all one solid line weight. I do that on one layer, then I create another layer, and then I go in with so the outline I did with the pen tool. Now I'm switching over to my Blob Tool on a separate layer, and I'm going in and adding all the little interior anything basically inside that outline. And that's a little different because I want it to be little thinner lines, more line weights to it, so you get some thicks and thins and things like that. And yeah, so I'm just going to go over and basically trace the character in Illustrator. And yeah, so that's pretty much the technique that I'm using, and we'll get into a little more maybe when I get to actually coloring this thing in and all that. But I wanted to talk a bit about the character. And as I mentioned in the intro, last season he was kind of he seemed a little jealous, and he was not having, basically, he didn't want to have anything to do with 11. And you know, I just like, come on, man, you know, I was really rooting for him to kind of turn around, and he did. And you know, towards the end, then he really came through and everything. So I like that. And in season 2, he's great. I mean, him and kind of this little mini feud with Dustin, they're kind of fighting over a girl and everything. That's all great. And just their awkwardness trying to approach this girl. And oh man, it was, he was really great. So yeah, I love how the characters there's kind of little ups and downs and twists and turns and things, and first you're really liking somebody, and then next thing you know, it's like, ah, man, you know, or vice versa or whatever, which is the case with Lucas. But another thing I really liked is I liked that in this season you got to see, I mean, in the previous season you got to see, of course, Will's family, big part of it, and you got to see Mike's family, but you didn't really get to see much with Lucas's family. I think maybe in the sort of the funeral for Will, which, you know, spoiler alerts, he wasn't really dead, but anyway, they did have a funeral for him and everything. I know you got to see Lucas's parents, and I want to go back there. I'm curious if they're still played by the same people as before. I didn't really pay attention to that because they just had like a little minor role, so I might have to go back and check that out. But you know, this season we got to see definitely a lot more of like like Dustin's family, like his mom, and that was just great. I mean, his mom was just perfect, a perfect match for Dustin. And as far as Lucas, his parents were sort of, you know, here and there. They didn't really have a big part, but he had a sister, and the sister was just awesome. I mean, just this little sister, and she was just, oh, she was such a pain. I could just imagine, and you know, having her from a sister. I never had sisters growing up, but man, but she was just a great character and everything, and her playing with the Barbies and the He-Man and everything, just calling Lucas a nerd and everything. She was just. She was great. So I definitely liked that. And before I started watching, I was kind of wondering if we were going to get to see some of the other, you know, the other families and everything, if they would have a bigger role. And I'm glad that they actually did that. That was really cool. So going back to the drawing right now, I am kind of flatting this, and I'm still using the Blob Tool. Yes, it's kind of a new tool for me. So sometimes I forget what it's called, but it's the Blob Tool, and I think I don't think it's in some of the earlier versions of Illustrator, but if you have Illustrator CC, then you should have the Blob Tool, and it's pretty cool. It works kind of like, it basically draws like a vector tool, and when we're done drawing, it draws sort of like a pen tool, and you can get different weights and everything like that, and when you lay off of it, when you let go of the tool, it just converts it to a shape, and anything you draw over that shape in the same color becomes part of that shape. So it's really cool. It works. Before, I would have done this whole part in Photoshop, and this kind of smooths out some of the lines, and again, it's all vector, so I'm liking using this better than I did before with what I was doing in Photoshop. So I'm really glad I started using this tool and everything. So that's what I'm doing now. Now I'm going in, I've already flatted everything, which is basically just putting down flat colors. And now I'm going in and adding my shadows and highlights, and I'll basically just keep doing this until, you know, it looks good to me. So that's what I'm doing now. This headband here is pretty fun to do with the camouflage. But another thing I want to talk about Stranger Things, I think it was the second episode of Stranger Things 2, was the whole Halloween episode, and I kind of talked about that in that little intro before we started drawing this and everything. That whole thing about the Ghostbusters and nobody wanting to be Winston, and that was great, you know. And it reminds, you know, I knew that they were going to dress up as Ghostbusters, and I was wondering going into it how they were going to approach that. Or are they really going to just make Lucas Winston because he was black? And that whole scene was just so great. But, you know, you should be able to do whoever you want to be for Halloween. I mean, when I was a kid, back in the 80s, you know, I'm old, so back in the 80s, and of course, you know, that's why I love Stranger Things so much, all the 80s references and everything. But back in the days, when I was a kid and we would trick or treat, and we really got into Halloween, and my parents really did some incredible costumes for me and everything, and I won like costume contests and stuff like that. And back then, I mean, the costume. And back then, if you bought a store-bought costume, you could tell it was a store-bought costume because it was basically a plastic bag with a mask with a little, you know, a little elastic around it. Now it's kind of hard to tell. I saw somebody dressed up as 11. I thought, oh, that's a cool costume. And I figured it's homemade, and I went to like saw it in the Spirit store. It was the same exact costume. But back then they didn't really have cool costumes. But my parents made some really awesome costumes for me. This is before cosplay. Now that's blown up so much that everyone's got these really awesome costumes. But back then it wasn't. Not everyone had that. So that was just a great childhood memory for me. Is just getting dressed up in these costumes my parents made, and going to costume contests, and I won a bike one time, and all kinds of cool stuff because they really did some awesome costumes. But what I was getting at was when I was a kid in the 80s, I was huge into Mr. T. I mean, anyone in my age, it doesn't matter you're black and white or whatever, you're big into Mr. T. So I wanted to be Mr. T. I mean, he was in Rocky 3. He was in the A-Team. He had an animated series where he fought crime with a bunch of, kid acrobats and a dog with a mohawk. And so I really loved, I love Mr. T. I wanted to be Mr. T. And to me, it didn't matter that
he was black or whatever, I mean, that's who I wanted to be. So my parents made this awesome Mr. T costume for me and everything, and so I think you should be whoever you want to be. It shouldn't matter what color you are. If you love a character or somebody, and if that's somebody you look up to or you just like that character, so I don't see any reason why Lucas couldn't be Venkman if he wanted to. But I still kind of want to give props to Winston, because I always liked that character. But I can see why no one in that particular group wanted to be Winston, and they've explained it. He's not a scientist. He kind of joined late and everything. And these kids, the nerdy kids, are super smart. And not that I wasn't nerdy, I was, but I wasn't like, back then I wasn't totally into science. Like I have a love for it now, obviously, with the whole underground lair and the lab coats and everything. I like that stuff now, but back then it wasn't something I was really into. So I mean, who knows if I would have fought about it. And back then I was the kind of kid that I was like, well, if you guys want to be that, I'll be whoever, that's cool, for the most part. Sometimes I might stick to my guns, because it seemed like I always liked the characters that weren't the most popular. Like in Kiss, I used to love Kiss, and I always wanted to be Peter Criss, but he wasn't like, Gene Simmons or anything like that. So I usually got to be kind of the characters I want, because I always wanted to kind of be the one that not too many people wanted to. So anyway, this is my finished drawing of Lucas. Let me know what you guys think. This is a fun one.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for Lucas and this week's drawing Stranger Things. We'll be back one more week. We'll try to get 2 more done next week, and then we'll kind of wrap up this series. But I want to know, moving forward, kind of what you want to see me do from the channel. I kind of took a little departure to do this kind of stuff, and I'm anxious to get back to sort of the kind of art tutorials and just art advice, and I don't know, maybe product reviews, whatever you guys want to see. Let me know if you have any suggestions in the comments section. But before I go, I want to do what I always do in these little Stranger Things drawing videos, and just kind of pitch my comic book, because if you're a fan of Stranger Things, you may be a fan of my comic book too. It's called Young and the Dead. It's a kids versus zombie story. It's like Goonies meets Night of the Living Dead. So if you're into like 80s adventure stuff starring kids, it should be right up your alley. So anyway, so that's the comic. It's available on my website at serkworks.com. There's 3 issues available right now. I threw 5, but I meant 3 issues available on my website at serkworks.com. And I will see you guys later for another Stranger Things, drawing Stranger Things. Later. That is all.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me here in the Art Lab. There's a lot of other great content on the channel, so click that subscribe button and you won't miss a thing. If you're an aspiring evil genius, visit Serkworks.com for all your mad science supply needs. And if you want to contact me, hit me up in the comments section or follow me on social media. I'm looking forward to it. I'll see you then.